Thank you for staying with us, and definitely I would say happy democracy day. 14 years and counting. What should I say we address? So we're looking at 14 years of democracy in Nigeria, and Reverend Jesse Jackson speaks. Now, 14 years ago, the Nigerian military returned to the bar after handing over to an elected civilian government. And since then, there has been peaceful transition through election after the 2 terms of 8 years of retired General Olusegun Obasanjo as president to Alhaji Umar Yar'Adua, who died in office, and then he handed over to the incumbent, Dr. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. First, President Jonathan implemented an electoral reform subsidies and of course so which did not go through visa litigation as in the past. And then secondly, that reform led to the election of Jonathan and transferring enough to show that he was widely accepted by the electorate. More than that, the president put in place a blueprint called the Transformation Agenda, designed to revive all sectors of the economy. Apart from that, the current administration has been working hard to deepen democracy and democratic values by allowing the independence of the legislature and the judiciary. For this Tuesday, we will be this Wednesday, Dr. Carbon will be discussing the 14 years of democracy in Nigeria from the point of view of a well-renowned American civil rights leader, authoritative voice in American politics, and supporter of democracy and development in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Reverend Jesse Jackson. You're welcome, sir. Good to have you in our studio.
Homecoming.
Yes, very well. Now, like you said earlier, it's been 14 years since the military handed over to civilian rule in Nigeria. How would you describe the Nigerian democracy?
It's a good thing that the Nigerian democracy is taking root. The civilian leadership elected by the people has its appropriate place. Those who have its place. This has been a very difficult state to manage because of the sheer size of Nigeria and the diversity of Nigeria. Nigeria is 1/4 of the African population. Its wingspan touches 1/2 of the entire African population. And the many languages and tribal groupings, and yet somehow you mold it into a one Nigeria. That was one of the easier things that comes from now. You have more democracy, you have more stability, you have more growth, and so you owe much of that to President Goodluck Jonathan and to the people who will democracy to be real in their lives.
Well, when I remember you far back as 1965 when you went to that market, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, you being the African, mission envoy to Africa, you must have had quite a lot of experiences with other African countries. You were speaking earlier about Liberia and Egypt and all of that. Now, let's look at, the military rule in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria was ruled for many years by the military and was able to organize peaceful transition 4 times. How significant is this democratic development of the African continent?
It's mature. Our first president was General George Washington. And the democracy was defined by the led by General. And then 246 years of slavery and democracy coexisting, which is not reality, but and then you have another 100 years of blacks and women could not vote. But we kept maturing until as of 1965, really just 48 years ago, blacks got the right to vote, democracy got bigger. Women got the right to serve on juries, it got bigger. 18 years got the right to vote, it got bigger. People on campuses could vote on campus, got bigger. Proportionality now, you get votes according to your proportion, not absolute numbers, it got bigger. The problem is that once you leave the field of slavery and colonialism and occupation, is democracy. It's the highest and most mature form of government. Because in democracy, you govern to the consent of the governed. You're not governed by the lineage of some king or some despot or some military general who's dealing with power and arbitrariness. You deal with in a democracy, people do matter, they just vote matters and everybody matters.
Yeah, let's look at the election reform that we have in Nigeria. Before the death of the late president, Yar'Adua, we seated a committee to find out how Nigeria can actually transit successfully during elections. one understand actually said that this process has led to reduced disputes in Nigeria, electoral disputes. What's the view?
When the struggle with ending disputes is an ongoing one, in the U.S., for example, we had an election in 2000, where Al Gore got more votes than George Bush. The winner lost and the loser won because of technicality in 2000. In 2004, you had an election where a successive number of votes were not counted. This last election had an attempt to suppress the vote and manipulate the vote by sitting standards and making it difficult for common people to vote. So the struggle for power in democracy seems to be ongoing. But here you are moving toward more democracy, more elections of democracy, accepted by the people. And when you begin to move away from tribalism and away from Christian versus Muslim, North versus South, you begin to elect leaders based upon their commitment to one Nigeria. That's the ultimate victory, is the idea that if you're in the U.S. or in Britain, if you're a Nigerian, whether it was a Yoruba or Igbo, I mean, you really do not know. But the identity of one Nigeria and of all the things that can be said in the basic state is that you keep fighting for the identity that connects you. That there are numerators. I'm from Borno State, I'm from Delta State, I'm from River State. But the common denominator is Nigeria. And it is your strength lies in the strength of a strong federal government. States have their place and have their rights. In the end, the strong central government is the key to stability.
Yeah, I think I remember far back in history, I think in 1984, Neil Robinson said something in New York Times, and he said he remembers first that he wanted to help people through the rivers of the waters. Then he went into India, the Medal of Freedom, 2000 presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, for a man who knows what freedom is and who knows the fight for it, you look at the three arms of government for Nigeria. You have the judiciary, and you have the legislature, and you have the executive. How important are the three arms for development in the Nigerian institution?
Yeah, I appreciate welfare was not like when I have it. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, south of our country. My father in World War II came home, had to sit behind six prisoners of war on American military bases. He had been fighting a war for democracy and came back home and could not vote. I was arrested in 1960 trying to use a public library, on freedom. We cannot drive a bus, on freedom. And so the unfreedom of the appreciate freedom. Now you can go in a hotel, motel place to choose. When Dr. King gave the address in Washington in 1963, all people here like I have a dream. When we missed it, that day, from Texas across to Florida to Maryland, people said that we couldn't use a single public toilet. They gave that speech. Our money was confiscated. We could not buy ice cream at Harvard Johnson, a restaurant. We could not go to Roman Holiday Inn. They give the speech. We could not as a people vote. And so he dreamed beyond our predicament. If we kept marching and kept fighting, remained nonviolent in our discipline, we one day we would achieve. And so when you think about 1963, the March on Washington, 50 years ago, now President Barack Obama was elected twice, we never stopped fighting. We got a public accommodation bill to wipe out states abusing their rights, deny us the right to vote. We got the right to vote in 1965, and life has changed. Life is before and after the right to vote, the right to participate. Now you get people who are beginning to learn to vote across lines of race and gender and region, because our country is so big divided north and south, and given the Civil War. And now people begin to vote beyond race, beyond region. And no doubt there'll be at some point in time an American woman is thinking it beyond gender will be voting.
How vital is this kind of struggle, to the three arms of government? We have the legislature, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. How vital is this kind of struggle?
Well, they must be independent. These two branches must be independent. And part of what they must do is to have also separate the powers, and checks and balances. That is the key to the whole thing, is checks and balances. stop the abuse of power and stop the corruption, because man is inclined to push everything to the limits. The limits determined by a judiciary, the laws of the legislators, or the leadership of the executive. It's the key to the country's growth now. You move towards military, and even most ideas out there don't even fear military rule. I mean, more kind of beyond military rule. Now you must somehow hook up Christian Muslims must find common ground. Wherever we live in our faith, we live under the law. Whatever your faith is, we live under the law. And therefore, we make a peace with each other's religious freedom, and not you just a burning churches and burning mosques. There is no future violence. There is no future violence. When someone gets a writ of pain, there is no future violence.
Now, when you look at the story of Africa as a whole, major stories coming out of Africa seems to be the bastion of corruption. And then until we get rid of corruption, perhaps we might not have the full development that we need in Africa. But let's look at Nigeria. What do you think?
The corruption was the slave trade, 246 years. The corruption was occupation by foreign forces. The corruption was colonialism. Now we're into what's called democracy. Democracy was 1967, 56 years ago with Nkrumah in Ghana. Okay. And so these 56, we've been learning, we heard about Nigeria about 60 years old. America, what was America at age 60? We were buying and selling people. What was Britain at age 60? Buying and selling people. You're not doing that. No, the fact is that there is corruption, it must be stopped. Because the people, you know the character of the person or our nation, and how a future nation is. Nigeria is too rich in resources to have for people. There must be a commitment to wipe out poverty. Of course, every Nigerian drinkable water, a decent house, a wage and benefit. Those who govern, because some other govern, shouldn't live much better than those that they govern. A democracy is bottom up, it's not just top down. And so this country is so blessed. This is the Garden of Eden. You have everything. You have the water, you have the oil, you have the gas, you have the soil, you have good, brilliant people. This is the Garden of Eden. And in this garden, there must be peace and justice. And that Garden of Eden still cannot have gas flares.
When you said something in the sermon, you said nobody can save us from Mastodon. And, you talk about resources in Nigeria being a big Garden of Eden. How do we do this? How can the leaders work closely with the people to achieve this?
Well, you said that you do not want an outside force determining the character of your people or of the nation. And so, if you might just say, who has the power to stop sales from shooting up gas flares? You see, would not be in America. Who has the power to stop sales from spilling oil, that's destroying fish, wildlife, and people? The people have that power, must use their power to that end. Who has the power to elect leaders? The people. Or to diselect them if they don't do the right thing. You have that power. And so using your power constructively. And what you don't not have is time to go out there and violence. Because it is such a deception. You look at the global news and you see Nigeria and a war in the north, of course. Okay. Let me look at you. This Africa, take a step back, is the largest continent on earth. You give it China, Europe, and America, and Africa has some land space there. It's the most resourceful continent on earth. Africa is growth now is number 2 only to China. Within 2 years, Africa's growth will be greater than China's. A big deal. 7 to 10 fastest growing nations in the world are in Africa. Sunrise is Africa's facing sunrise. You're breaking old ancient bonds of slavery, occupation, colonialism, one leader rule, despotism. We're moving toward democracy. It takes some time to develop the most mature state because democracy is given by the consciousness of the people. What people tolerate will determine what will be for the government. What you tolerate will determine what quality of life you have.
Okay, there's been reports that by 2015, Nigeria is switched to exist as one entity, one country. We have that prediction based on some of the challenges that the country has been facing.
I don't believe that. I think that Nigeria is getting strong and close to not apart. Those people get Nigeria from problem to 2015. They're not worth dignifying. Nigeria will get stronger. I mean, the North and South will get stronger. The president getting up John King's now to diversify the economy beyond just oil and gas, agriculture business. Nigeria is now the number 5 export of oil in the whole world. Now, once Nigeria starts to get refineries, it doesn't make sense to be exporting gas and oil every day trying to buy gas from other countries. There are 2 or 3 non-functioning refineries here, but the fact is, Nigeria uses its power to develop it in the field and still going to be partners. They're going to be partners to help you rebuild refineries. For example, you cannot have over long periods, so you can't have these people, the poor people not have a kind of revolution. So even when you have these conflicts, at the end of the day, you must find political solutions to security issues. If you by some sense of moral purpose.
Okay, so how can Nigeria actually deepen its democracy to be able to harness some of its resources and, of course, avoid the issues of conflict?
One thing Nigeria is exporting is not just oil, but people who are resilient to exist in America. Nigerians, my next door neighbors, 2 man and woman, both are. He has a PhD, he has a medical doctor. Because so long as people just visit once they go away, they find a better way of life, they tend not to come back. So you're exporting people. But the honeybee must feed the private rob. Those who are blessed to get to the education, bring it back, and they must be saturated education. But when they come back home, there must be a place for them. People, these kind of opportunities, there must be a place for them at home. So that means you must have if too few people own too much, and too many have too little. You have not just a east-west gap, you have a north-south gap. And now, every time I go up into the United Country and see all these oil pumping and unpaved roads, and it's just every road should be paved. Every